His name is Daniel Weber, senior product analyst at a mid-sized SaaS company in Berlin, 34 years old, 6 years in the same organization. Calm, precise, reliable, the kind of employee managers describe as critical but low maintenance. Daniel joined the company when it had fewer than 80 people. He built dashboards that no one else could build, standardized reporting that leadership now depends on, and mentored 2 junior analysts who were later promoted. His performance reviews have been consistently high. Not exceptional, those are rare, but always in the top bracket. Exceeds expectations with strong ownership. Last year, his salary increased by 3.2%. It was not a surprise. The number was delivered with the usual framing, aligned with market benchmarks, consistent with company policy, reflecting overall performance calibration. The language was clean, almost clinical. Daniel nodded, said thank you, and returned to his desk. At first glance, nothing seemed wrong. His salary was above the national average. His team respected him. His manager trusted him. There was no visible conflict, no crisis, no failure. From the outside, it was stability, but the tension began to accumulate in smaller, less visible ways. A new hire joined the team, 3 years younger, less experienced, hired externally. During onboarding, the new colleague casually mentioned his compensation range. It was close to Daniel's, within 5%. The difference in experience was closer to 5 years. Daniel did not react immediately. He made a mental note and moved on. These discrepancies happen, he told himself. Markets shift, timing matters, it's not personal. A few months later, another data point appeared. A recruiter reached out through LinkedIn with an opportunity for a similar role. The offered salary range was 20 to 25% higher than Daniel's current compensation. He declined the conversation but saved the message. By itself, each signal was explainable. Together, they formed a pattern. The discomfort was not emotional, it was structural. Something did not add up. Daniel began to notice how compensation discussions were framed inside the company. Raises were described as percentages, not absolute values. Promotions were tied to role scope, not output. Salary adjustments followed cycles, not results. The language consistently redirected attention away from individual contribution and toward predefined structures. It felt neutral, rational even, but also oddly indifferent to reality. The first real shift came during a quarterly calibration meeting. Managers across departments discussed employee performance and compensation adjustments. Daniel was not present, but his manager later summarized the outcome. "You're at the top of your band," she said. "There's limited room for further increases without a role change." The phrase was delivered as information, not judgment. It sounded like a technical constraint, similar to budget limits or headcount caps, but it carried a different weight. Top of your band. It implied a boundary, not of capability, but of permission. This is where the system begins to reveal itself. Most large organizations operate with compensation bands, structured salary ranges assigned to each role and level. These bands are designed to create internal consistency, prevent arbitrary pay decision, and align compensation with external market data. On paper, they are rational instruments. In practice, they introduce an invisible ceiling. Once an employee approaches the upper limit of their band, salary growth slows dramatically. Not because their performance declines, but because the system no longer allows meaningful increases without a formal change in role or level. This is not an exception. It is the design. Daniel's situation was not unusual. It was predictable. The mechanism operates quietly. Early in a career within a company, salary growth is relatively fast. Annual increases, occasional promotions, adjustments to match market rates. The curve feels upward, responsive, rewarding. Then, gradually, the slope flattens. The employee becomes fully compensated for their role. Further increases become marginal, 2%, 3%, sometimes less. Performance continues, often improves, but the financial recognition decouples from output. At this point, a second mechanism begins to interact with the first. It is less formal but equally powerful, often referred to as the loyalty penalty. The loyalty penalty is the gap between what a company is willing to pay its existing employees and what it is willing to pay to attract new ones. External hires are priced against current market conditions. Internal employees are adjusted incrementally from their previous salary. The difference compounds over time. Daniel had not changed companies in 6 years. The market had moved. His salary had moved more slowly. The system did not correct this automatically. It preserved it. From the company's perspective, this is efficient. Replacing employees is expensive and risky, but as long as retention remains within acceptable limits, there is no immediate pressure to adjust internal salaries to full market levels. Incremental raises are sufficient to maintain stability. From the employee's perspective, the effect is subtler. There is no sudden drop, no explicit signal of underpayment. Just a gradual divergence from external value. Daniel began to test this hypothesis. He scheduled informal conversations with peers in other companies. He revisited recruiter messages he had previously ignored. He compared job descriptions, responsibilities, and compensation ranges. The data was consistent. He was not underperforming. He was underleveraged. The realization was not dramatic. It did not come with anger or urgency. It felt more like a correction of a flawed assumption. He had assumed that value and compensation were directly linked within a single organization. That consistent performance would naturally translate into proportional financial growth. The system did not operate on that assumption. It operated on bands, cycles, and external benchmarks applied selectively. Once Daniel understood this, his behavior changed. He became more precise in how he evaluated opportunities. He no longer filtered recruiter messages based on convenience or loyalty. He treated them as market signals. He updated his understanding of his own price. 3 months later, he agreed to an interview. The process was efficient. 2 rounds, 1 case study, a final discussion with the hiring manager. The role was similar to his current one, with slightly broader scope. The offer came within 2 weeks. The salary was 28% higher. There was no negotiation. The number was presented as standard for the role. This was the turning point. Not the offer itself, but what it represented. It was external validation, independent of his current company's structure. A different system, using different reference points, had evaluated the same person and arrived at a significantly higher valuation. Daniel did not accept immediately. He scheduled a meeting with his manager. The conversation was calm. He explained the situation, presented the offer, and asked if the company could match it or propose an alternative path that would align his compensation more closely with market levels. His manager listened carefully. There was no defensiveness, no dismissal, but the response was constrained. "I understand," she said, "but we're limited by the band for your role. A jump of that size isn't possible without a promotion, and there isn't an open position at the next level right now." The explanation was consistent with the system. It was also final. The company did not dispute his value. It simply could not or would not reprice him outside the existing structure. This is the point where many employees misinterpret the situation. They see it as a negotiation failure, or a lack of recognition, or a breakdown in communication. It is none of those. It is a structural boundary being enforced. Daniel understood this. There was no argument to make, no persuasion to apply. The system was functioning as designed. He accepted the external offer. His departure was handled professionally. Exit interview, knowledge transfer, farewell messages. His manager expressed genuine regret. "We would have liked to keep you." The statement was true, it was also irrelevant. 6 months later, Daniel's former company hired a replacement for his role. The new salary was closer to what Daniel had been offered externally than what he had been earning internally. The system had reset the price, just not for him. This is the underlying logic that remains mostly unspoken. Organizations optimize for cost stability, not individual fairness. Compensation bands are tools of control, not reflection. Loyalty is not penalized intentionally, but it is not rewarded structurally either. The invisible ceiling is not a barrier you can break through with effort alone. It is a parameter you either operate within or step outside of. The implication is not that one should constantly change jobs. That is a simplistic conclusion. The implication is that internal growth and external valuation are governed by different mechanisms. Confusing the two leads to stagnation. Understanding the difference allows for choice. Daniel did not become more skilled the day he changed jobs. He did not suddenly create more value. What changed was the system that measured and priced his contribution. The lesson is not motivational. It does not suggest that everyone is underpaid or that companies act in bad faith. It suggests something more precise. Your compensation is not a direct function of your performance. It is a function of the system you are currently inside. And systems, unlike effort, have boundaries.